I heard the scream before I saw her. She's got a gun. Call 911. Our HOA president, Evelyn Carter, stood in the cul-de-sac like a siren and heels phone held high, narrating my wife's every move as if the truth needed her permission. Sarah had only stepped out to grab the mail. 11 minutes earlier, we were unpacking boxes and arguing about where the coffee maker should live. 42 seconds later, 3 cruisers slid to a stop. Doors cracked muzzles up the whole neighborhood, holding its breath. I felt the ground tilt, until Sarah's voice cut through the panic, low and steady, reaching for federal identification. The badge flashed, radios crackled, and the lead officer's posture changed. Recognition, respect. A brief salute. In that moment, the story Evelyn had scripted collapsed, and the story we never wanted to tell began. Because this wasn't just a nosy neighbor gone feral. It was the first tremor of a buried fault line, old lies, forged paper, and a dead sister who'd left us a map. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from and your local time. When we first chose Oakwood Hills Community, I imagined mornings with birdsong and evenings with quiet walks under the street lamps. My wife Sarah had been pushing for a fresh start after years of carrying grief like a shadow. Her younger sister Emily had died in what officials called a suicide 3 years earlier, but neither of us had ever believed that story. Moving here was supposed to help her breathe again. I should have known that peace never lasts long where secrets are buried under polished lawns. The first neighbor to introduce herself wasn't the type who brought cookies or flowers. Evelyn Carter appeared in our driveway with the confidence of a judge and the smile of someone who already knew your sentence. Mid-50s, sharp platinum hair, and a binder so thick it looked more like an indictment than community rules. She extended a hand like it was a test eye, scanning our boxes, our license plates, even the faded decals on Sarah's old SUV. "Welcome to Oakwood Hills," she said, as if she owned every brick. I shook her hand, but it felt like clasping a steel trap. At first, I dismissed her questions as typical HOA nosiness. What did we do for work? Why had we moved here? Did we know about the standards expected in this neighborhood? But there was something deeper, more deliberate in the way she cataloged our answers. Sarah, ever calm, described herself as a consultant in financial analysis. Not exactly a lie, just the cover she often used when neighbors got too curious. Evelyn's eyes lingered on her longer than polite. Something passed between them that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. That night I went to the garage to organize tools while Sarah tried to make the kitchen livable. It was there behind a wooden shelf that I found the folder. Yellowed edges, official stamps, and a case file number that made my stomach sink. The name leapt from the page, Emily, Sarah's sister. The file described harassment complaints dismissed without evidence closed by Detective James Miller. Notes in the margins didn't match the timestamps, and a local phone number repeated itself across the pages. The same area code as our new community. I held it under the single bulb light, heart pounding like I'd just uncovered a ghost. I hadn't even processed the discovery when the click of heels echoed across our driveway. Evelyn stood there again, binder tucked, tight smile sharper than ever. Her gaze dropped to the folder in my hands. For just a second, too, maybe her mask slipped. Her pupils dilated, breath caught, fingers tightened. Then it was gone, replaced by a breezy smile. "Previous owners leave the oddest paperwork, don't they?" she said. But I saw it, recognition. She knew exactly what I was holding. Later, Sarah read the file with the control of a professional, but I recognized the storm behind her eyes. Emily's death wasn't random, and this community wasn't innocent. "She isn't greeting us," Sarah whispered. "She's measuring us, taking inventory." The next morning, the scream tore through the neighborhood. Evelyn's voice carried like a siren. "She's got a gun. Call 911. Sarah had stepped out for the mail, wearing jeans and a jacket. Her concealed carry, legal holstered, peaked when the wind lifted her coat. Evelyn pounced on the chance, already dialing before anyone else could breathe. 3 patrol cars arrived within minutes, tires screaming against asphalt lights, painting the manicured lawns in red and blue. Doors opened, weapons drawn, commands sharp and unforgiving. Hands where we can see them, my chest locked as adrenaline crashed through me. Neighbors gathered at windows, cameras raised. Evelyn stood proudly at the curb, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she narrated to anyone listening. "I told you she was dangerous." But Sarah didn't flinch. Her tone cut through the chaos, reaching for federal identification, every syllable measured. Her badge flashed in the afternoon sun, the nameplate gleaming Federal Bureau of Investigation. Silence rippled. The lead officer, a man named Brennan, squinted, recognition dawning across his features. He'd worked joint operations with her years earlier. In one fluid motion, he lowered his weapon, raised his hand, and delivered a crisp, respectful salute. 42 seconds. That was all it took to unravel Evelyn's story. Cameras captured the salute, the sudden shift from threat to respect, the look on Evelyn's face when her narrative collapsed. She had summoned law enforcement to humiliate us, but instead she'd provided the most public proof that Sarah wasn't just a neighbor with a gun, she was federal law enforcement. The crowd dispersed uneasily, whispers floating across hedges and lawns. Evelyn retreated without another word, binder clutched to her chest like a shield. But the damage was already done. The mask of suburban civility had slipped. We weren't newcomers anymore, we were targets in a war we hadn't agreed to fight. That evening, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the case file spread before her, the badge resting on top like a declaration of battle. She knows something about Emily, Sarah said, her voice low, steady, but dangerous in its calm. And if she knows, then Miller's fingerprints are all over this place too. I looked out the window into the twilight, the cul-de-sac glowing under streetlights, shadows stretching across driveways. Families closed their blinds, lights flickered out the neighborhood, retreating into silence. But beneath that silence, I felt it tension coiled, tight secrets pressed down like a spring waiting to snap. We had come for peace. What we found was a battlefield disguised as a community. And Evelyn Carter had just drawn first blood. The salute should have ended everything. It should have been the moment when Evelyn Carter realized she'd overplayed her hand, when the neighborhood finally saw through her manipulations. But for Evelyn, humiliation wasn't a setback, it was fuel. The second officer, Brennan, lowered his weapon and acknowledged Sarah's badge. I watched Evelyn's jaw tighten. She didn't shout or protest. Instead, she smiled. A smile that told me she wasn't retreating. She was recalculating. Sarah, calm as ever, slid her badge back into her jacket. "Have a good evening, officers," she said, her voice even professional. The patrol cars pulled away, engines fading into the suburban stillness. Neighbors who'd been peeking from behind blinds and hedges withdrew as if the show were over. But the air didn't relax. If anything, it felt heavier, like the pause before thunder. 42 seconds, Sarah murmured once we were inside. She sat at the table, badge glinting under the overhead light. That's how fast lies can unravel. She didn't say Evelyn's name, but she didn't have to. We both knew this wasn't finished. The next morning, Evelyn struck back, not with sirens this time, but with whispers. At the Oakwood Hills coffee shop, she leaned across to young mothers, voice dripping concern. "I only worry about the children. Guns around little ones. It's unsettling, don't you think?" By noon, she'd moved on to retirees at the clubhouse, dropping words like federal authority and surveillance. By evening, she was at the playground benches, warning parents that some agents forget where the job ends and the neighborhood begins. It worked faster than I expected. Smiles turned stiff waves, became nods. Conversations ended abruptly when Sarah walked past. Children who'd run across our lawn 2 days ago now skirted around it. Evelyn wasn't screaming anymore, she was orchestrating. She knew exactly how to spin the 42-second salute into a story of intimidation rather than vindication. Sarah saw it too. "Classic counter-narrative," she muttered as we sorted mail that evening. Among the bills and catalogs was a crisp white envelope stamped with the HOA seal. Inside, notice of compliance review. Resident security profile. The language was bureaucratic but chilling. Due to your federal employment status, additional oversight may be required to ensure community safety. I felt my chest tighten. "She's using your badge against you." Sarah's expression didn't change. Her training wouldn't allow it. But I knew her well enough to see the flicker of anger in her eyes. She's building a case. Not a legal one, at least not yet. A social case. Fear is her weapon. That night, as Sarah drafted notes, I couldn't sit still. I wandered into the garage again, staring at the yellowed file I'd found. Emily's name glared up at me, inked into the paper like a ghost refusing to leave. The margin notes the mismatched timestamps, the phone number. With our area code, they pulsed with questions. What had Emily uncovered before she died? And why did Evelyn react like she'd seen it before? The answer came not in a revelation, but in the sound of Evelyn's heels again on our driveway. It was almost midnight. Through the blinds, I saw her standing at the curb binder, under her arm phone raised as she photographed our license plate. I stepped onto the porch before I could think. "Do you need something?" My voice was sharp, too sharp, but I didn't care. Her smile never wavered, just ensuring proper records for the HOA. Nothing personal, but her eyes lingered on me, cold, calculating. Oakwood Hills values safety, especially with sensitive residents. She walked away before I could respond, heels clicking like a metronome marking time. Sarah appeared beside me, silent, her gaze locked on Evelyn's retreating figure. Inventory, she said again. She's still taking inventory. The following day brought the escalation Sarah had predicted. 4 separate blows, each delivered with surgical precision. First, a $25,000 emergency fence repair bill, citing obscure HOA bylaws we'd never seen. Second, a call from our bank's suspicious activity flagged on our credit requiring hours of verification. Third, a letter from the city inspector's office responding to anonymous complaints about code violations on our property. And fourth, an email from our insurance provider suggesting heightened risk due to unspecified safety concerns. None of it was technically illegal. All of it was suffocating. Each demand meant paperwork, phone calls, money time. Evelyn hadn't picked up a weapon. She didn't need to. She was weaponizing the system. Sarah studied the timing, her face unreadable. She's running a coordinated operation. This isn't amateur harassment. Someone taught her how to do this. That night we sat in silence, the files spread between us, Evelyn's shadow looming over every line. Sarah traced Emily's name with her finger, then looked up at me. She knew Emily. That's why she reacted. Evelyn isn't just a neighbor drunk on power. She's connected to whatever killed my sister. Her voice was steady, but I felt the weight of it. The house seemed smaller, the walls closing in. I thought moving here would heal Sarah. Instead, we'd walked into the same storm. Emily never survived. The next morning, Sarah made her decision. I found her at the kitchen table, her badge on the wood like a card in a high-stakes game. She thinks she's found our weakness, Sarah said. It's time she learns the truth. I stared at the badge, knowing what she meant. She was going to reveal her identity, not just the badge flash of yesterday, but fully openly as a strategic weapon. That's dangerous, I said. You'll make yourself a bigger target. Sarah's lips curved into the smallest, coldest smile. She already thinks I'm a target. Better she understands I'm the wrong one. And with that, the clock began ticking toward the most dangerous move of our lives. By the third day, Sarah's decision to reveal her identity was no longer a plan, it was a certainty. She moved with the precision of someone preparing for battle, each motion measured, deliberate. I watched her lay her badge on the kitchen table beside her coffee mug like a general setting down a sword. We don't get to choose the fight, she told me quietly, but we do get to choose how we fight. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Because the truth was, Evelyn had already escalated this beyond neighborhood drama. The false complaints, the surveillance, the bureaucratic warfare, it all bore the fingerprints of something larger, something more deliberate. And then there was the folder, that cursed folder I'd found in the garage, called to me like a whisper. Emily's name wasn't just a coincidence, it was a warning. Her harassment complaint, closed by Detective James Miller, had been written off as baseless. Yet the notes in the margins, times phone calls, fragments, painted a different story. Emily had been silenced, not ignored. When Sarah studied the document, her face became unreadable, her training snapping into place. She didn't see her sister anymore. She saw evidence. Miller's signature, she said, tapping the bottom of the page. And look here, this number. She traced a phone number scrawled hastily in blue ink. The area code matched Oakwood Hills. This wasn't closed properly. It was buried. Buried just like Emily. That evening, as dusk bled into the cul-de-sac, Evelyn made her next move. She appeared on our side pathfinder, tucked under her arm, phone in hand. Sarah stepped out, jacket, zipped, posture calm but commanding. From the kitchen window, I could see Evelyn approach like a shark scenting blood. Quite a professional stance for a consultant, Evelyn said, her eyes narrowing as she scanned Sarah's every movement. Sarah didn't blink. Rodriguez. Sarah Rodriguez. Federal Agent, Financial Crimes Division. She said it plainly, without bravado, but the effect was electric. I saw Evelyn's mask slip for the briefest second, her pupils widening, her breath stalling before she pasted on a smile. Rodriguez, she repeated, tasting the word like it was bitter. Didn't we have a Rodriguez family here before? The younger one, what was her name? Emily. My chest tightened, but Sarah's voice was steady steel wrapped in silk. My sister. Evelyn's smile turned predatory lips curving like a blade. Such a tragic situation. But small world, isn't it? Very small world indeed. The air between them crackled with tension, two predators circling the same prey. Sarah, the agent, cloaked in federal authority. Evelyn, the queen of a kingdom built on secrets. Neither blinked, neither broke. And in that moment I understood this wasn't about homeowners' dues or property lines. This was a war of information. That night, Sarah and I sat across from each other in silence. The folder lay between us, its weight heavier than stone. She knows, Sarah said finally. She knew Emily. She knew what happened here. Evelyn isn't just running an HOA, she's running an operation. I swallowed hard. But what kind? Sarah's eyes darkened. The kind my sister died trying to expose. The next morning, retaliation arrived with bureaucratic precision. A second HOA letter, this one more aggressive property compliance review scheduled. Residents with federal connections subject to enhanced oversight. The language was clinical, but the intent was poison. Evelyn was twisting Sarah's identity, transforming authority into threat, and it didn't stop there. By afternoon, 3 more blows landed. First, a $50,000 bill for emergency drainage repairs that had never happened. Second, a notice from the city inspector claiming we'd modified our porch without permits. Third, an anonymous complaint to our insurance provider alleging unsafe storage of firearms on property. Sarah read each one with chilling calm. This is systematic, coordinated. She's not improvising, she's executing a playbook. But where did she get it? I asked. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. The folder already had one name scrawled across it, Detective James Miller. That evening, Evelyn doubled down on her psychological warfare. She made rounds of the neighborhood binder in hand voice, dripping with concern. To the investors, property values are at risk with federal surveillance next door. To the retirees, peace and privacy are threatened. To the parents, armed agents can be unpredictable. Each lie tailored perfectly to the fears of her audience. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street. Others whispered when we walked past, their eyes sliding away. The community wasn't ours anymore. It was Evelyn's stage, and we were the villains in her play. But then something happened she hadn't planned for. Mrs. Margaret Collins, a retired attorney, knocked on our door just after sunset. She carried a folder of her own, thinner than Evelyn's but no less dangerous. "I've been reviewing the documents Evelyn circulated," she said, her voice steady, "and something doesn't add up." Sarah gestured her inside. Margaret spread the papers across our table. The timestamps don't match the metadata. The photos she's showing, the neighbors, they're doctored. The audio recordings edited. Sloppy work, but convincing enough for people who don't know how to check. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You think she's fabricating evidence? I know she is," Margaret replied. "And I think she's been doing it for years." The revelation hit like a hammer. For the first time, Evelyn's web had a weak point. And we had an ally. Sarah's voice hardened with resolve. "Then we don't just defend ourselves, we go on offense." That night, for the first time since we'd moved to Oakwood Hills, I saw something flicker in Sarah's eyes. Not grief, not fear, but purpose. Emily's death had been a wound that never healed. Now it was fuel. And Evelyn Carter had no idea she'd just awakened the wrong enemy. Because Sarah wasn't just my wife. She wasn't just an FBI agent. She was Emily's sister, and she was ready for war. Margaret Collins' arrival changed everything. Until then, Sarah and I had been reacting, dodging blows, patching holes, trying to survive Evelyn Carter's relentless campaign. But with Margaret at our table, flipping through fabricated evidence like it was a children's puzzle, the balance shifted. We weren't just victims anymore. We had a witness, an ally, and most importantly, a crack in Evelyn's armor. Margaret explained it with the cool detachment of a woman who had spent 30 years dismantling corporate fraud. "Look here," she said, pointing at one of Evelyn's so-called violation reports. The document claims it was generated on March 3rd at 9:47 p.m. But the metadata embedded in the PDF shows creation at 2:14 a.m., a completely different day. And these photographs, she tapped 2 glossy prints Evelyn had distributed to the board. Same timestamp but different lighting angles. They couldn't possibly have been taken at the same time. Sarah studied the evidence, her expression tightening. "She's sloppy. But she's confident, because nobody else here knows how to look deeper." "Exactly," Margaret replied. "She manufactures just enough plausibility to sway the community, banking on fear to do the rest. Most people won't question authority if the paperwork looks official." For a moment, I felt the tiniest flicker of hope. Maybe Evelyn wasn't invincible after all. The very next evening, however, Evelyn struck again, this time with the full theater of HOA power. We received a notice taped to our door: mandatory emergency meeting, Oakwood Hills Community Center, 7:00 p.m. The agenda was blunt: review of federal employee security concerns. When we arrived, the parking lot was already overflowing. Neighbors filed inside, clutching binders, whispers filling the air like static. The room buzzed with unease, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, as if even the building sensed what was coming. Evelyn stood at the front, cream-colored blazer, pristine binder spread open on the podium like scripture. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice smooth, commanding. "Tonight we address concerns that directly impact the safety and harmony of Oakwood Hills. As you know, our new residents bring with them unique circumstances that require additional scrutiny. Her eyes flicked toward Sarah, then lingered. The first blow came swiftly. Evelyn displayed photographs of Sarah outside her badge visible at her hip. Federal identification, she said, her tone heavy with implication. But ask yourself, what does that mean for us? For our privacy? For our children? Murmurs rippled across the room. The second blow was audio snippets of Sarah speaking on her phone, carefully cut to sound like surveillance threats. Financial records don't add up. We'll monitor them closely. Stripped from context, the phrases painted a sinister picture. Evelyn let them hang in the air, savoring the effect. The third blow was paperwork pages of fabricated violations, all bearing official HOA letterhead. Emergency fence instability, unauthorized structural modifications, resident intimidation. Each one false, but each one framed with the authority of regulation. I looked around the room and saw it working. Faces that once smiled at us now tightened with suspicion. A man in the back shook his head. A mother pulled her child closer. Evelyn's poison was seeping in. Then Sarah stood. No binder, no theatrics, just her voice. Calm, controlled. "You're being manipulated," she said evenly. "These documents are fabricated. The timestamps don't match. The photographs were altered, and the audio spliced together to tell a story that never happened." Evelyn's smile widened shark-like. "Oh, and you expect us to take the word of a federal agent, an agent with every reason to intimidate this community into silence." The room buzzed, fear and doubt colliding. That's when Margaret rose. She cleared her throat, and the noise died instantly. Though retired, her reputation as a corporate attorney still carried weight. "I've reviewed the evidence Evelyn provided," she said firmly. "It's fraudulent. I can demonstrate it right now." She walked to the projector, connected her laptop, and pulled up metadata logs, digital signatures, discrepancies highlighted in red. These photographs, different days, these documents altered, these audio clips edited. I would stake my license on it. Gasps filled the room. Neighbors looked from Margaret to Evelyn, uncertainty breaking through fear. Evelyn's face tightened, but she recovered quickly, her voice sweet as ever. "Margaret, with respect, perhaps age has clouded your technical skills. Or perhaps," Margaret shot back, her voice like steel, "your lies have finally met someone who can see through them." The tension snapped like a taut wire. Neighbors who had leaned toward Evelyn now shifted uneasily, doubt replacing certainty. One man muttered, "She's right, the lighting is different." A woman whispered, "If Margaret says it's fake, I believe her." Evelyn tried to regain control, flipping pages in her binder with a practiced flourish. "Regardless, federal involvement in our community poses undeniable risks. We must act decisively for the safety of Oakwood Hills." But her words no longer carried the same weight. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was spreading fast. That night, back at our kitchen table, Sarah allowed herself the smallest exhale. "She won't stop," she said. "But now she knows we're not alone." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Evelyn had lost ground tonight, but predators don't retreat. They adapt. And as I looked at the folder still lying on our counter, the one with Emily's name, Miller's signature, and the phone number tying everything back to this place, I realized something terrifying. Evelyn's war wasn't just about us. It wasn't just about Sarah's badge or our home. This community had been her hunting ground for years, and Emily had stumbled too close to the truth. Now it was our turn. And unlike Emily, Sarah wasn't going to let Evelyn write the ending. The morning after the HOA meeting, Evelyn Carter made her next move. It wasn't a direct strike, not the kind you could see coming and block, but a quieter, more insidious offensive. She understood better than anyone that destruction works best when it looks like order. By sunrise, letters had landed in almost every mailbox in Oakwood Hills. The paper was thick, the font formal, the HOA seal embossed at the top like a government decree. The subject line read, "Enhanced Oversight Protocol for Federal Residents." Beneath, Evelyn's words slithered through legal jargon. "Due to potential conflicts of interest, residents employed by federal agencies will undergo additional review for compliance with community standards." Translated, it meant Sarah is dangerous. Watch her. By the time Sarah and I opened our own envelope, the neighborhood was already buzzing. At the corner cafe, I overheard a young mother whisper, "I don't want my kids playing near an FBI agent with weapons." On the walking trail, retirees muttered, "They bring trouble wherever they go." Evelyn's whisper campaign had grown legs, sprinting from door to door faster than we could keep up. Sarah read the letter once, twice, then set it down with surgical calm. "She's using my badge as a weapon," she said. "What was supposed to be my shield has become her blade." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was the bank. "We've flagged suspicious activity," the representative said politely. "We'll need you to verify several recent charges. None of the transactions were ours." Hours later, after frozen accounts and exhausting phone calls, we discovered Evelyn, or someone working with her, had triggered fraud alerts designed to choke us financially. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. A city inspector, clipboard in hand, announced he was responding to anonymous complaints about structural violations on our property. He walked through our backyard with the officious air of someone searching for a crime that didn't exist. By evening, our insurance company called, citing elevated community risk factors and hinting at increased premiums. 4 attacks in less than 12 hours. Each one minor, technically legal, yet devastating in combination. Death by paperwork, by bureaucracy, by the slow crush of systems bent against us. That night, Sarah spread every letter and notice across our table, arranging them like evidence. "This isn't random," she said, her voice a measured calm that masked fury. "The timing is too precise. The sequence is too deliberate. Evelyn's not just improvising, she's executing a campaign." Margaret, seated across from us, nodded gravely. "This is classic systemic harassment. I've seen corporations use these tactics to bankrupt whistleblowers. She's borrowing from a playbook." "But where did she learn it?" I asked. "She's an HOA president, not a corporate shark." Sarah tapped the old file I'd found in the garage, the one with Emily's name and Detective James Miller's signature. "She didn't learn this on her own. Someone trained her. And Miller's fingerprints are all over this." The thought chilled me. If Evelyn had law enforcement allies, then every attack against us wasn't just petty harassment, it was institutional. The next day confirmed it. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Evelyn appeared at our door, binder in hand, smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Good morning," she sang, as though nothing had happened. "Just following up on our oversight process." She handed Sarah another letter, this one demanding access to our property for safety inspections. Sarah's reply was ice cold. "Access denied. You have no legal authority." Evelyn's smile never faltered, but her eyes hardened. "Then, perhaps, we'll need to escalate through proper channels." As she turned to leave, Margaret stepped forward. "Be careful, Evelyn," she said, her voice low but steady. "Forgery leaves fingerprints, and I'm very good at finding them." For the first time, Evelyn's mask cracked. Just slightly, but enough. She didn't reply. She just walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, binder clutched tighter. That evening, Sarah made her boldest decision yet. She placed her badge on the table, not hidden, not flashed in desperation, but displayed openly. Tomorrow, she said, I meet her on her ground. No more dodging, no more silence. If Evelyn wants to weaponize my identity, then she'll see exactly what it means to be on the wrong side of it. I stared at the badge, torn between pride and dread. "That makes you a bigger target." "I already am," Sarah replied. Her eyes burned with a mixture of grief and resolve. "Emily died because no one believed her. I won't let Evelyn bury me the same way." The following morning, Sarah did exactly what she promised. She walked into the HOA office during posted hours, calm, professional, badge clipped, where everyone could see it. Neighbors glanced up from their forms, whispers cutting through the air like blades. Evelyn stood behind the counter, binder, open eyes narrowing at the sight of Sarah's open declaration. "Good morning, President Carter," Sarah said evenly. "Let's talk about compliance, yours." The room went silent. You could feel it, the shift, the spark. Evelyn's smirk returned, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Careful, Agent Rodriguez," she purred. "Even federal authority has limits." Sarah leaned forward, her voice low but lethal. "So does fraud, and when it collapses, it crushes everyone standing beneath it." Evelyn froze just for a heartbeat before recovering. But I saw it. We all did. For the first time since this war began, Evelyn Carter looked afraid. That night, Sarah returned home and dropped her badge on the table with a soft, metallic thud. "It's begun," she whispered. "She knows I won't back down. Now we see how far she's willing to go." I didn't say it aloud, but the truth burned in my chest. Evelyn would go all the way. She already had blood on her hands. And unless we stopped her, she'd have ours too. The night after Margaret dismantled Evelyn's forged evidence in front of half the neighborhood, the air in Oakwood Hills was different. For the first time since we moved in, whispers carried doubt about Evelyn instead of us. Porch lights flickered as neighbors talked in hushed tones, trading rumors, replaying Margaret's digital breakdown of Evelyn's lies. But if I'd learned anything about Evelyn Carter by then, it was this: humiliation didn't break her. It sharpened her. By dawn, she was already recalibrating. Every doorstep bore a glossy newsletter stamped with the HOA seal, its message carefully designed to reclaim control. The language was smooth, almost soothing. "Your safety is our priority. Recent misinformation has clouded the truth, but rest assured the HOA is acting in the community's best interest. Buried in the middle was a thinly veiled threat. Federal employees often blur the line between professional authority and private life. Oakwood Hills deserves better. Neighbors who'd left the meeting uncertain now eyed us with new suspicion. A woman walking her dog crossed the street to avoid Sarah. A boy who'd been tossing a football in his yard dropped it when he saw me retreating inside as if my shadow carried danger. Evelyn's whispers had turned into a chorus again, her control seeping back through fear. At breakfast, Sarah read the newsletter in silence, her face a mask of calm. She folded it neatly and set it aside. She's buying time, she said, testing how much control she still has. Margaret joined us an hour later, files in hand. She'll escalate, she warned. Mark my words, Evelyn doesn't retreat. She retaliates. And if Miller's in her corner, it won't stop with paperwork. The mention of Detective James Miller made my stomach knot. His name had hovered like a ghost since I found that file in the garage, the one that tied him to Emily's death. If he really was Evelyn's ally, then our battle wasn't against an HOA tyrant anymore. It was against law enforcement corruption wrapped in a suburban facade. That prediction came true by midday. 4 attacks, precise and devastating, hit us in sequence. First, an emergency repair invoice slid under our door, $48,000 for drainage maintenance we'd never requested. The deadline for payment was listed as immediate. Second, a bank alert locked our joint account for fraudulent activity, forcing Sarah to spend hours verifying purchases we hadn't made. Third, a city inspector appeared with a clipboard citing anonymous complaints of unpermitted structural modifications. He photographed our porch from 3 angles, shaking his head as though we'd already been condemned. Fourth, an email from our insurance company arrived that evening, warning of elevated risk factors and threatening to raise our premiums by 40%. Individually, each attack was annoying. Together, they were crushing. They consumed time, energy, money, the very resources we needed to fight back. Sarah studied the stack of papers like a general reviewing enemy troop movements. This is professional, she said. The timing, the escalation, the bureaucratic layering. Evelyn isn't improvising. She's following a playbook. Margaret nodded grimly. Corporate intimidation strategies. I've seen them used against whistleblowers. Designed to overwhelm until you break. I stared at the letters, the fake invoice, the inspector's report. But how does an HOA president learn tactics like this? Sarah tapped Emily's file, which still lay open on the table. She didn't learn it. She was taught. And Miller is the teacher. That evening, as the sun bled red across manicured lawns, Evelyn herself appeared. She strode up our driveway in her cream blazer binder tucked under her arm like a shield, her smile sharp as a blade. "Evening, neighbors," she said sweetly, though her eyes glittered with malice. Just following up on our oversight process, she handed Sarah a letter demanding access to our property for safety inspections. Sarah took it without blinking. Access denied. You have no legal authority. Evelyn's smile tightened. Then perhaps we'll escalate through proper channels. Before she could turn, Margaret stepped forward. Careful, Evelyn, she said, her voice low, deliberate. Forgery leaves fingerprints. And I'm very good at finding them. For the briefest moment, Evelyn's composure cracked. Her jaw clenched, her pupils narrowed. Then she recovered, spinning on her heels with a sharp click of stilettos vanishing into the shadows. When she was gone, Sarah exhaled slowly. She knows Margaret is a threat now. That makes her dangerous. That night, the 3 of us sat at the kitchen table long after midnight. Sarah's badge glinted under the light, Emily's file spread open beside it. Margaret sipped cold tea, her eyes scanning documents. The weight of it all pressed on me like a storm cloud. Evelyn's lies, Miller's shadow, Emily's ghost. Finally, Sarah spoke. I can't keep fighting this as a neighbor. Evelyn's trying to strip me down to nothing but fear. But I'm not just Sarah Thompson from number 14. I'm Agent Rodriguez. And it's time she remembers that. I stared at her badge, my throat tight. If you go that far, you'll make yourself the biggest target in her sights. Sarah's eyes burned with grief and resolve. She already has me in her sights. Better she learns I'm the wrong target. The following morning, Sarah made her move. She didn't hide her badge or her posture. She walked into the HOA office during business hours, her presence sharp as a blade. Neighbors turned to watch, whispers following her like a trail of sparks. Evelyn looked up from her desk binder, her expression flickering when she saw the badge openly clipped to Sarah's belt. Good morning, President Carter, Sarah said evenly, her voice calm but lethal. She placed a folder on the desk. Let's talk about compliance, yours. The room froze. Evelyn's smirk twitched, her fingers tightening on the binder. Careful, Agent Rodriguez, she replied, her tone dripping disdain. Even federal authority has limits. Sarah leaned closer, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper, yet it carried through the entire office. So does fraud. And when it collapses, it buries everyone standing under it. For the first time, Evelyn didn't smile. That evening, Sarah returned home, the badge still gleaming on her hip, her eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. She dropped the day's mail on the table with a heavy thud. "It's begun," she said simply. "She knows now. She knows I won't back down." I didn't reply. Because deep down I knew the truth, Evelyn Carter wouldn't back down either. She'd already orchestrated a campaign that had destroyed families before us. She would go further. All the way. And for the first time, I wondered if we were ready for just how far that meant. The morning after Sarah confronted Evelyn in the HOA office, Oakwood Hills felt like a battlefield disguised as suburbia. The lawns were still trimmed, the mailboxes, polished children, pedaled their bikes under the warm Sunday. Yet behind every drawn curtain and polite smile, I sensed the same thing Sarah did. Everyone was choosing sides. Some neighbors waved to us more openly than before, quiet acknowledgments that Margaret's evidence had planted doubt. Others avoided eye contact, entirely clutching their children's hands tighter, as if simply being near us invited danger. Evelyn had ruled this neighborhood for years, with fear and bureaucracy, and people weren't ready to admit that their queen might be a fraud. By mid-morning, Evelyn made her next move. Flyers appeared on doorsteps stamped with the HOA seal. The headline read, "Emergency Vote, Removal of Non-Compliant Residents." The language was cold bureaucratic, but the intent was unmistakable. She was preparing to expel us. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at the community center. Sarah read the flyer once, then set it down on the kitchen table beside her badge. "This is it," she said, her endgame. Margaret arrived an hour later, her satchel heavy with documents, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "She's calling for a kangaroo court," she said grimly. "She'll use doctored evidence, neighbor testimony she's manipulated, and the illusion of authority. If we don't dismantle her tonight, she'll win by sheer volume of lies." The weight of it pressed down on me like a stone. This wasn't just about saving our names or our house anymore. This was about Emily, about every family Evelyn had bullied, fined, or driven out. When the meeting began, the community center was overflowing. Folding chairs lined the walls, neighbors stood in the aisles, and the air buzzed with nervous tension. At the front, Evelyn stood tall, her platinum hair, immaculate binder wide open. She smiled with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. "Residents of Oakwood Hills," she began, her voice smooth, practiced. "We are gathered tonight to preserve our safety, our harmony, our way of life. Sadly, some among us have brought disruption, intimidation, and threats into our community. Federal authority has no place here. We must decide whether to protect our families or allow chaos to fester." Applause rippled from her loyalists. Others sat stiff, unsure. Evelyn launched into her performance. She projected photographs of Sarah outside our home badge, visible her holstered sidearm glinting in the sunday. "This," Evelyn said dramatically, "is not safety. This is intimidation." Gasps rose from the crowd. Then came audio clips, spliced recordings of Sarah's voice, twisted into threats about monitoring and compliance. Evelyn let the silence afterward fester like poison. Finally, she displayed her fabricated violation reports, each one stamped with official HOA letterhead. Emergency repairs ignored, unauthorized modifications, aggressive behavior toward residents. Page after page stacked like bricks in a wall, designed to crush us. The atmosphere was suffocating. Fear hung heavy, spreading like a contagion. Evelyn was a master manipulator. She knew exactly which chords to strike. Then Margaret rose, calm, unshaken. She walked to the projector with her laptop, her satchel opening like a magician's chest. "I've reviewed these so-called exhibits," she said evenly, her voice carrying authority honed in decades of courtrooms. "And I will show you why they are lies." Click. The projector screen changed. Metadata logs appeared in sharp red highlights. These documents claim to be created on March 3rd, but the embedded data shows they were created on March 4th at 2:14 a.m. Mismatched, altered. Click. Side-by-side photos filled the screen. Same timestamps, different shadows, different days, forgeries. Click. Audio waveforms glowed on the screen, jagged lines dissected. Here are the splice marks. Edits so clumsy a first-year law student could identify them. Gasps filled the hall. Neighbors leaned forward, whispering doubt, igniting like wildfire. Evelyn tried to interject. "Margaret is confused, confused." Margaret cut her off, her voice suddenly sharp as steel. "I spent 30 years prosecuting corporate fraud. I know fabrication when I see it, And Evelyn Carter has been fabricating evidence against her own neighbors for years. The silence that followed was electric. People shifted in their seats, glancing at Evelyn with suspicion. Then Sarah stood. She didn't shout, didn't wave papers. She simply walked to the front, her badge clipped visibly to her belt. She set Emily's file on the podium beside Evelyn's binder. "My sister Emily lived here," Sarah said, her voice calm but trembling with restrained grief. "She filed complaints. She tried to expose this corruption. Days later, she was dead. Detective James Miller signed the closure of her case, wrong dates, missing evidence. And Evelyn Carter knew her. Evelyn reacted to her name like it burned." The room fell into stunned silence. Neighbors looked at Evelyn, searching for denial. For the first time, Evelyn's mask slipped. Her smile faltered. Her hand trembled as she clutched her binder tighter. "She's lying," Evelyn snapped, finally her voice rising. "This is slander, nothing more." But her words rang hollow. The fear that once fueled her power was evaporating, replaced by doubt, suspicion, anger. From the back, a voice broke the silence. "If Emily's death was covered up, what else has she hidden from us?" Another voice followed. "How many families did she drive out with fake violations?" The tide had turned. The meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors shouting, some demanding Evelyn resign, others arguing in disbelief. Evelyn slammed her binder, shut her smile, gone her posture rigid. She stormed out her heels, cracking against the tile like gunshots. Back home, the three of us sat in silence, the echo of the night still heavy in the air. Sarah placed her badge on the table, Emily's file beside it. "We forced her into the open," Sarah said finally. "She won't stop now. She'll go further. She'll reach for every weapon she has left." Margaret nodded grimly. "And if Miller really is backing her, the next blow won't be HOA letters. It will be institutional, police, courts. Systems designed to break you." I looked at them both. The federal agent who refused to bow, the retired attorney who had put her reputation on the line, and I felt the truth settle like ice in my chest. We had won tonight's battle. But the war was about to get darker. The night Evelyn stormed out of the community center should have been our victory. Neighbors had seen her lies collapse in real time, her binder exposed as nothing more than a collection of forged theater props. But Sarah knew better. "She's not beaten," she whispered as we drove home under the glow of the street lamps. "She's cornered. And a cornered predator is most dangerous." Her words proved prophetic within 48 hours. The first sign was subtle, a black SUV idling at the cul-de-sac windows, tinted engine low. It lingered for hours, leaving only when Sarah walked toward it with her phone raised recording. The second sign came in the mail, an envelope marked City of Brookhaven Legal Affairs, inside a summons for a property compliance hearing that cited codes we'd never heard of. And then the third, Sarah's phone buzzed with an email from the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility. Effective immediately, she was placed on administrative leave pending review of multiple citizen complaints. 23 complaints to be exact, filed within 72 hours. Each one a carbon copy of Evelyn's narratives, claims of intimidation, surveillance, abuse of authority. The precision was breathtaking, too coordinated to be coincidence. Sarah sat at the table, scrolling through them with the cold detachment of someone dissecting an autopsy report. "Different IP addresses," she muttered, but identical phrasing. "She's using templates. Someone's feeding them to her." Margaret leaned forward, glasses sliding down her nose as she scanned the screen. "This isn't neighborhood gossip anymore. This is lawfare. Someone inside the system is helping her pull the strings." The name neither of them spoke hung heavy in the room, Detective James Miller. That night, Sarah opened a box I'd never seen before. Hidden behind the false back of our closet, wrapped in plain brown paper, it contained years of careful work, financial records, surveillance photos, affidavits collected quietly. Every page tied Evelyn and Miller together in a web of fraud, extortion, and intimidation. "I started this the day Emily died," Sarah admitted, her voice steady, but her hands trembling as she laid out the files. "I knew the case was wrong, but grief clouded my judgment. I thought I could heal by moving on. I was wrong. Evelyn never stopped. Miller never stopped. And Emily left me enough to finish what she started." The plan formed quickly. Margaret would act as the legal spearhead, dissecting the fraudulent evidence Evelyn had circulated. I would trace the paper trail connecting shell companies Evelyn used to funnel HOA funds. And Sarah, suspended, stripped of her badge, but not her training, would gather the last piece of proof we needed: direct evidence of collusion between Evelyn and Miller. The break came from an unlikely place. A retired neighbor, Mr. Howard, knocked on our door carrying a shoebox. "I don't like what she's been doing," he whispered. "I've lived here 30 years. I've seen too many families driven out. Inside the box were cassette tapes, old but functional, each one labeled with dates. Howard had been recording HOA meetings for decades. One tape dated 3 years earlier made Sarah's blood run cold. Evelyn's voice crackled through the speaker. "Close the file, Miller. We can't have her poking around. If she pushes, we'll handle it." A second voice, male, steady official, replied, "Consider it done. Suicide closes the book cleaner than homicide." The room froze. My stomach dropped. Sarah's eyes darkened with fury. Margaret pressed stop on the recorder, her hand shaking. "That's conspiracy," she said. "And obstruction. If this gets to a federal prosecutor," Sarah cut her off. "It won't just get there. I'll put it there myself." The final confrontation came faster than any of us anticipated. Evelyn, emboldened by Sarah's suspension, called for another special HOA session, claiming it was to finalize our removal. But this time, Sarah and Margaret came armed with more than rebuttals. The community center was packed, tension buzzing like static. Evelyn strutted to the podium, binder under her arm, eyes gleaming with renewed confidence. "Neighbors," she began, "we cannot ignore the disruption any longer. The federal agent among us has brought only chaos. Tonight, we vote to end it." She hadn't finished her sentence when Margaret stepped forward. Calm, deliberate. She plugged in her laptop and projected the waveform analysis of Howard's tape. Evelyn's voice filled the hall, unmistakable. "Close the file, Miller. Suicide closes the book cleaner than homicide." Gasps erupted. A neighbor shouted, "That's her voice." Another cried, "What did she do to Emily?" Evelyn froze her face, draining of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then Sarah stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't posture. She simply set Emily's file on the podium beside Evelyn's binder and placed the tape recorder on top. "My sister's death wasn't an accident," she said, her voice breaking but steady. "It was a cover-up, and tonight every one of you hears it for yourselves." The room exploded. Neighbors who had once followed Evelyn now screamed for her resignation. Some demanded her arrest. Others turned on each other, arguing panicked that their silence had enabled this for so long. Within minutes, flashing blue lights appeared outside, but this time they weren't Evelyn's allies. They were federal agents arriving on sealed warrants. Sarah had quietly secured through contacts outside the Bureau's compromised channels. Evelyn was led out in handcuffs, her binder clutched uselessly against her chest. Hours later, Miller was arrested at his office, the shoebox tapes, and Sarah's hidden files forming the backbone of a federal indictment. The empire Evelyn built collapsed in a single night, not with the whispers she'd once wielded, but with the truth she could no longer bury. Weeks later, Oakwood Hills was quieter. Children played freely again, neighbors greeted each other without suspicion. Margaret was elected interim HOA president, tasked with reforming the community from the ground up. And at the entrance, a new plaque was installed, in memory of Emily Rodriguez, sister social worker, truth seeker. Her fight was not in vain. One evening, Sarah stood before it, her repaired bracelet catching the light. She exhaled slowly, a mix of sorrow and peace. "She's free now," she whispered. I slipped my hand into hers. "No," I said. "You freed her. This story isn't just about HOA corruption or bureaucratic warfare. It's about what happens when silence enables bullies, when systems built to protect are twisted into weapons of control." Sarah's journey was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for truth, for justice, and for her sister's memory. The lesson is simple, but hard lies thrive in darkness, but even the most elaborate deception collapses when the truth comes to light. Sometimes it takes courage, sometimes it takes allies, but it always takes persistence. If you're facing your own Evelyn, a boss, a neighbor, an institution, don't give up. Seek evidence, seek allies, seek the truth, because the truth once revealed is stronger than fear. Drop a comment below. Have you ever stood up to someone abusing power? Share your story, and don't forget to subscribe, because more HOA dramas and real-life lessons are coming your way.